Hi, so this video will be about the Anchor protocol. I'll briefly talk about how it works, what it is, but the ultimate goal of this video is to show how the revenue and the expenses of the protocol can be estimated in order to gauge the long-term health of the protocol. And the long-term health of the protocol can kind of be boiled down to at what rate the yield reserve is increasing or decreasing. If the yield reserve is decreasing at a very fast rate, then it's not sustainable long term. And of course, if it is increasing, then it is sustainable. At the end of this video, I'll show a dashboard of analytics that I made that tracks some metrics that are not shown on the Anchor protocol official dashboard. So things like the yield reserve time history, the time history of the collaterals, time history of the borrow percentage rates, etc. Also in this video, I'll go through an example calculation of how we can determine an estimate of this yield reserve depletion rate. So let's get started. The first thing to talk about is what is actually Anchor protocol. Basically, is advertised as a savings account on DeFi that is centered around the UST stablecoin. And what is different from this protocol than basically all other DeFi protocols is that it gives a very consistent 19.5 or 20%, as it has been advertised, yield on the UST balance for the deposits. And this yield has been pretty consistent throughout time. And this is why this is a big deal to a lot of people and why it's so attractive. And I'll just briefly go through what's on this dashboard so that we can understand what's different from my dashboard and this dashboard. So this dashboard gives a balance of the total yield reserve in UST, which is currently 459 million UST, as the total value locked here, total deposits versus total collateral. The Anchor price history is here. Again, here you can see the total deposit, which is about 8 billion UST versus how much UST is borrowed, which is about 2.4 billion. Here's the time history here. And then here are the two assets, or what are called B assets or bonded assets that Anchor protocol accepts as collateral. So B Luna and B ETH. And there are plans to expand the number of assets later, but this is currently what is being offered. And so this is total collateral value in UST, and then these are the individual separated out collateral values. Okay, so then now I just wanted to explain how the revenue and the expenses are going in and out of the Anchor protocol and how that goes to calculate the net income. So the net income equation is very simple. It equals the revenue minus the expenses. As long as the net income is positive, then the protocol is a sustainable one. And then if the net income is negative, then it is not sustainable. So let's go through the revenue sources first. The first revenue source is from borrowers depositing B assets, basically B Luna and B ETH, into the Anchor protocol. And those staking APYs get absorbed into the Anchor protocol and contributes as revenue. So currently I think the B ETH returns about 4-ish%, and then B Luna returns about 7%. That 4 and 7% gets added into the Anchor revenue. So that's the first revenue stream. The second revenue stream is the borrow interest rate that is charged to the borrowers for borrowing UST from Anchor. And so that's another stream of revenue, and that's on top of the staking APYs. Okay, so then what do the borrowers get in return for using their collateral or depositing their collateral onto Anchor? They get to borrow UST. And the borrowed UST comes directly from the deposit UST from depositors. I just noted these as dotted lines because they don't really get into the net income equation. This borrowed UST doesn't really get into any of these terms. I just wanted to show the flowing of the funds from depositor to borrower. Also, as a side note, the borrowers are incentivized by the Anchor token, and the Anchor token emissions subsidize the borrowers in order to offset this borrow rate. So as the Anchor token price increases, this incentivizes borrowers to borrow more. Okay, so those are the two sources of revenue mainly that the Anchor protocol has. Moving on to expenses. The largest expense by far is the earn APY that gets paid out to depositors at that 19.5%. And if you remember, the total deposits was about 9 billion. So 19.5% of the 9 billion gets paid out to depositors per year. And that's basically all of the revenue and expense sources for this net income equation. However, there is one other small revenue source that I'd like to mention, and that is this 1% of liquidated value. So basically when borrowers default on their loan, because their collateral value has dropped too much, they get liquidated. And part of that liquidation, a 1% fee gets charged, and that gets sent to the Anchor's yield reserve. So this is another source of potential revenue for the protocol, but it's a little bit difficult to estimate, so I kind of left it out, and it's also probably relatively small. All right, let's go through an example on how the yield reserve depletion rate can be calculated based on the revenue and the expenses of the Anchor protocol. So first I'll go through the revenues here. This is in green, and then this set of numbers, red, is the expenses, and then in blue is the net income. So for BLuna, in the revenue section, for a specific slice in time, the UST value of the total BLuna collateral is 3.8 billion UST. I'm just going to note everything here in millions. And then the staking APR on that is 7.2%. So when you multiply these two numbers together, you get the staking revenue for BLuna, which is 277 million UST yearly, estimated, obviously. And that revenue is about 0.76 million per day. Now, similarly for BETH, you have the UST value of 712 million. And then the APR rate on the staking is 4.4. That leads to a revenue of 31.34 million per year, which is about 0.09 million per day. And finally, this is the revenue obtained by charging the borrowers to borrow UST. It is a percentage of the total UST borrowed. Total UST borrowed here is about 2.4 billion UST, and the rate on the borrow charge right now is 12.4%. That results in a revenue of 293 million per year, and that is 0.8 million per day. So all these numbers can be found in either Lido Finance or the Anchor protocol dashboards. So per year, all these total out to 600 million in revenue per year, and then that equates to 1.65 million UST per day. So that is the revenue for Anchor protocol. On the expense side, it's only the UST paid out to the depositors, which current value of the deposits is about 9 billion UST at an earn rate about 19.54%. That equates to roughly a $1.7 billion expense yearly. And that is a 4.8 million UST expense daily. So finally calculating the net income, just have to difference these two numbers to get a yearly number, and that would be minus 1.15 billion UST per year, and that's obviously not sustainable. And as a daily value, that is 3.16 million UST. So the Anchor protocol yield reserve is estimated to lose about 3.16 million UST per day at these rates. Okay, so that is how the depletion rate of the yield reserves is estimated. Now I'm going to show you a tool that I built that tracks that automatically. And so this dashboard is on my website, and what it does is it calculates the yield reserve depletion rate, basically what we did in this example, once every 6 hours. So there are a few plots here that I want to go over. This is the Anchor yield reserves in millions of UST with respect to time. You can see it's been decreasing since March 1st. So none of these plots are available on the official Anchor dashboard. This plot shows the collateral in millions of UST. So this red line is for BLuna collateral, and then this blue line is for BETH collateral with respect to time. There should be another plot here, but I haven't gathered enough information to make a plot yet, but it will show the borrow rates with respect to time. And then finally, this last plot here shows the staking asset APYs. So BLuna is returning about 7 to 8% APY as a staked asset, and then BETH is returning about 4.5. Okay, so then this brings us to this section here where it automatically does those calculations I did in the Excel sheet. So these are the latest estimated numbers in UST based on the data from Anchor protocol. The revenue is calculated to be 648 million per year, which equates to 1.78 million UST daily. The expenses from deposits are about 1.75 billion UST per year, and that equates to a 4.8 million daily. And finally, the net income, which is the difference of the two, is minus 1.1 billion per year, which equates to about 3 million UST daily. And then I can click this button to show the details of the revenue, of the expenses, just show the breakdown of what the numbers are going into these calculations. Finally, in this section, it shows the yield reserve metrics, where this is the current yield reserve. And this is the 24-hour actual change of the yield reserve, which was at this date minus 2.88 million UST. So in a 24-hour period, it did decrease about 3 million UST, which is what was estimated here. And finally, for the estimated runway for the yield reserve, which is measured in days, is 152 days if the Anchor protocol continues to deplete the yield reserve at this 3 million UST daily rate. So if you're interested, please check out this website that I made. I think it's helpful to see some information that the Anchor protocol official dashboard doesn't show, and it also makes this estimation calculation to tell you how many more days the yield reserve can sustain the Anchor protocol's operations. Alright, I hope that video helped you understand a little bit more about how the Anchor protocol works and how it gets its revenues, and then how those numbers can be used to estimate a runway for the yield reserve. Understanding these numbers, I think, can give us an insight on how sustainable the protocol can be. So if you wanted to check out this website, I'll leave a link in the description below. If you like this video, please give me a comment, hit the thumbs up button, or subscribe. As always, stay safe, and thanks for watching.